Okay, in this video I'm going to be talking about absolute value. What is absolute value? Absolute value is the distance a number is from zero. The absolute value, just like distance, is always positive. Wouldn't matter if I travel this direction or that direction. Whether I walk forwards or backwards, I can't travel a negative distance. So let's look at the two examples they gave us. First, they gave us the absolute value of negative 2. Absolute value of negative 2 is 2. Why? Because it is 2 away from 0. And they gave me the absolute value of 3. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Why? Because it is 3. Whether you're starting on the right side or the left side, it's 3 away from 0. Again, absolute value of any number is always going to be positive. So let's look at this. So, and it's whether it's a whole number, fraction, decimal, absolute value of 1.2, 1 and 2 tenths is 1 and 2 tenths. The absolute value of negative 1/3 is positive 1/3. Again, absolute value of any number is always going to be positive. What if I had absolute value of 3, but outside of it I had a negative? So this is ultimately two problems. So first we have the absolute value of 3, but outside of it we have a negative symbol, which means you're ultimately multiplying it by negative 1 times the absolute value of 3. Then we follow the order of operations. The absolute value of 3 is 3. Okay, so absolute value is always positive, so we got 3, but then we take care of what's outside of the absolute value, and negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. So this happened to be negative 3. Why? Because we didn't have a negative symbol inside of the 3. Let me show you another one. So again, there is a difference between absolute value 3, negative symbol outside of it, absolute value of negative 3. We'll do the bottom one first. This one right here, the distance away from that is 3. Absolute value of any number is always positive. But this one is negative 3. Why? Because the absolute value of 3 is positive 3, but then positive 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Hopefully that makes sense. I can also extend this to problems with operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. So if I had negative absolute value negative 5 plus the absolute value of negative 5. Now if this were just negative 5 plus negative 5, they're both negative, so my answer would be negative 10. And your negatives, they're the same sign, you add them up, and since they're both negative, your answer is negative. But on this, I have to follow the order of operations, which I find the absolute value of negative 5. I'm going to erase this down here. Absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5, because again, distance is always positive. Absolute value of negative 5 is positive 5, and so our answer to the absolute value of negative 5 plus the absolute value of negative 5 is positive 10. Of course, I don't have to put the positive sign in front of it, so again, just 10 would suffice. I could also have a problem where I had negative absolute value negative 5 plus the absolute value of negative 5. On this one, same concept. Now, but on this, I have to follow my operation first. I'm going to add negative 5 and negative 5. Negative 5 plus negative 5. I could use a number line. I could use integer tiles, but ultimately I'm going to get negative 10. But I still have the absolute value symbols. Okay, so I do the operation first, and then I have the absolute value of negative 10, and the absolute value of negative 10 is positive 10. Why? Because distance can never be negative. So let's go back. So absolute value is the distance any number is from 0. The absolute value, just like distance, is always positive. So if it's a number, whether it's positive or negative, fraction, decimal, whole number, integer, it's always going to be that positive number. Okay? Because again, distance is always positive. So let me go back, sorry. Absolute value of negative 2 is 2. The absolute value of 3 is 3. And we see the example right here. Absolute value of 1.2, 1 and 2 tenths is 1 and 2 tenths. It's positive. Absolute value negative 1/3, whether it's a fraction, decimal, whole number, it's always positive. Distance is always positive. Absolute value negative 1/3 is 1/3. So, but on those problems where the negative sign is outside of it, distance is positive, so absolute value of 3 is 3. But then I multiply by that negative 1, and so I get negative 3. So if it's outside of it, the absolute value can't take care of that negative sign. All right. And then we can also extend it to operations. Like on this one, we have negative 5 plus absolute value negative 5 plus the absolute value of negative 5. Take care of that absolute value first. Take care of that absolute value. And I get absolute value of negative 5 is 5. Absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The operation in between is addition. And so 5 plus 5 is 10. On this one, I do the operation first because it's within the grouping symbol. I have to do addition first. Negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10, but it's still within the absolute value. And so the absolute value of negative 10 is positive 10. Why? Because distance is always positive. Okay, how far away is negative 10 from 0? It is 10. So I hope this video on absolute value has been helpful. If you need any additional help or have any questions or comments, you can email me at jhewlett@leisd.ws. Thanks.